figuring all that out. So the who is incredibly important, and it's usually what causes the problem or picking the bad people. No, you're not picking the right people to handle things. Number two is, well, where are certain assets going to go?
Hey, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I am so excited today. We have a very important topic, not an easy topic, but a very important topic. And we've got a very important guest with us today. And his name is Taylor Willingham. And I'm excited about having Taylor on because we're going to talk about really preparing our businesses, preparing our lives for that next step, that next step that nobody wants to talk about, like what happens when you're preparing for death, right? And we're going to talk about estate planning and trust and all those really, really great things that are really important now that you guys are building successful businesses. And I'm excited about having Taylor Willingham on with us because, first of all, Taylor is, you guys may know him for his title, WG Title and commercial title company, but he's also a distinguished estate planning and probate attorney. And he founded the firm Willingham and Galvan in 2010 and is the visionary behind the innovative approach of posterity planning. And he really focuses on creating opportunities for friends, families, and loved ones. So I'm really excited. He's an author. He's drafted over 10,000 estate plans and he's probated over 1,000 estates. Hopefully none of us have to go through probate, but he's going to explain that process today. And he is really an expert in really that subject of transferring assets, right? Transferring assets to that next generation, creating that next generation wealth and preserving that so the tax man doesn't get it, right? We don't want the tax man getting it or the probate man to get it. So I'm so excited about having Taylor here with us today. Hey, Taylor, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Well, we're excited to have you on this podcast because this is a very important topic. Our entrepreneurs have worked really hard their entire lives, and gone through the school of hard knocks, figured out profit first, and are building businesses hopefully that they can sell one day or pass to that next generation. And of course, that means they're building wealth too. They're putting away money in their retirement accounts, right, guys? You're doing that. That next topic is what happens when I'm not here anymore. What happens. I mean, granted, we're not going to be here to worry about it, when that happens, but we want to be in control of where that money goes. So I'm so excited that we're here talking about it. And, I know that, first of all, Taylor, I spoke a little bit offline about some horror stories that happened, right? For people that did not plan, did not think about this, did not put it on paper. And I get it. It's a hard topic to put on paper, right? Because first you got to have to face the fact of your own life, right? That it's going to come to an end one day and how you want things allocated. And you got spouse involved, it's planning, his or her conversation behind it. And it's not an easy talk to have. So Taylor, let's talk about why this is important and why this is important today.
Well, business, anybody that owns a business, you're an entrepreneur, estate planning is extremely important. And usually it's better maybe to tell some stories so we can go back and so you can understand why. So, some of the cases that I've had to deal with often involve business owners because a lot of times they're overwhelmed. They're not planning. They don't do anything. They don't really think about their situation that, hey, someday you might not be here or become incapacitated. And so you can't run your business anymore. And so what happens in those scenarios? And so one situation that I had during COVID was a doctor in our community passed away. And because of the situation, he didn't do any planning. He had nothing in place. So one of his nurses showed up at our office going, the doctor who runs this practice, he's passed. We don't have any access to any bank accounts or anything. No one knows what to do. And so I had to first, tell him, hey, you guys don't really have authority to do anything for him. You need to get a hold of his family. We got a hold of his family. His brother then came in, tried to take over the practice. In those situations, often we have to do what's called a temporary emergency administration, meaning we have to go to the court and say, hey, we need someone to be appointed just right now in an emergency situation to run the business so it doesn't go under. Unfortunately, that takes some time. It isn't, even though we can get in pretty quick into a court hearing versus when we're doing a regular probate, still takes a couple weeks. Well, when you have a bunch of employees that need to get paid and pay period came around and they're already getting paid, they're bailing. They got to go somewhere and figure out what's going on. And so by the time his brother was able to, get control, get everything figured out, get people paid, know what was going on in the situation, the business was basically gone. And where before, when the employees were there, maybe there was something to continue and maybe sell off. And so that's often a scenario that we deal with business owners, is not understanding this concept. When you form a business, a corporation, it's a separate person than you. So that's one of the big issues, is you may pass away, but the business hasn't passed away. And so in able to run this business, we can probate your estate all the time, but you are not your business. And so getting someone the authority to make decisions, especially if you have partners in different things, all those things become very confusing of what you can do. And so in a lot of situations, spouses are cut out of bank accounts that people, you're a CPA, so you're kind of familiar with how people run their businesses. Sometimes they use their business bank account as their personal bank account, and all of a sudden spouse finds out, hey, I can't get into that account to pay my bills because spouse that passed was the only one with authority on the business. So if you're a business owner, this is a very real situation, especially if you have employees. You really need to think through how you're structuring everything and how you're putting everything together.
Oh, that is so true, Taylor. I mean, seriously, just your example of the physician client. I mean, you miss payroll and suddenly your employees are working for somebody else, right? You don't have much time in that transition to really get things together. The sad thing about that was that doctor's business was an asset. It was something that could actually have been sold, right? And if word got out that he passed away, that he was no longer seeing clients because he wasn't there anymore, then suddenly that asset just went from 10 million to zero potentially, right? With that happening. And so it wasn't just, not making payroll. It was losing an entire asset that was potentially millions of dollars in valuation, which is pretty sad.
Oh yeah, it's there's so many different things. I have another client. Their situation was he owns a construction business, and his situation was the same. He did no planning, didn't put anything together, and basically the whole family lived off of him. He had adult children, none of them really worked, and so he was supporting each one of them. He was supporting as his ex-spouse, he was supporting her too. And so when he passed, it was devastating because he has all these general contractors. He has everybody's trying to get paid. Projects are getting stalled out because of that situation. So there was a lot of issues that were caused. Luckily, there was somebody in the family that was able to step up to the plate, get things done for him, and knew the business well enough to kind of function it and run it for a while. But those situations happen all the time with entrepreneurs and business owners. And it's sad to watch because it's totally unnecessary, because there's a lot of things we can do to structure things so it's easy for transitions to happen.
I love that. That's really important, and thanks for telling us those stories. It kind of hit home, right? To be able to see that, and I imagine that probably happens to like 80% of small businesses out there, unfortunately. So none of us are immune, and so this is important. Now, what I want to talk about before we go into steps of what we can do to protect ourselves, and first steps of doing that is, there's this word that circulates. That's that scary word, probate. Let's talk about what is probate and what does that mean, and what is the risk of ending up in probate?
So probate is the process that we take property from a deceased person to a living person. And most people, when they think of probate, are thinking about the times when we have to go through a court system. Okay, so probate sometimes can involve having to go to court in order to get people appointed. And so really, when we're doing probate, there's two things that we want to kind of figure out. One is, well, who are the rightful heirs to this property? Okay, we have whatever property, like for a business, of course, the business doesn't die, but someone has rights to the shares that were owned by the person who's passed away. So we're trying to figure that out. Well, who's the rightful owner of the property? But the second thing that we're also trying to figure out is who are we going to give authority to handle all this? Okay. And so we referred that as you're setting up an estate and an administration of someone's estate. So sometimes, of course, you don't need someone to administer an estate. You just need to know who the heirs are, and the heirs can just go get the property. That's usually involving situations where we just have like a house. That's it. There's no debts of the estate. We're trying to figure that out. But the job of the administrator is, one, make sure that we're going to get the property to the heirs that are supposed to get it. But also, two, is making sure that creditors are getting paid. And that's one of the things that businesses have a lot of. And I'm actually having this issue right now with one of my clients, because she keeps trying to go get bonds, and they keep terrifying her, saying, well, you're going to be liable for the business's debts and if things go wrong. And I'm like, well, no, the business didn't pass away. We're not probating the business. We're probating, this estate, and you happen to be the shares that are going to do of that business are part of the estate, not the business itself. And so we're going through those type of issues and trying to explain everything. And the process of doing that gets more and more difficult based upon how much assets you have and how complicated the scenario is. And so when you own a business, those are incredibly complicated probates, because we're dealing with a lot of different things that are going on versus most people. We're not dealing with a really difficult probate, because most people have lost most of their assets when they pass. So there's not much there, or they've sold off a lot of things. And so it's kind of an easy thing to deal with. But in those situations, when you have a business, it just adds the complexity, the cost to things. The last probate I would say that I did with a business owner, this guy didn't have anything done too. The administrator took probably about $150,000, almost $200,000 in fees. Now, those fees had to be approved by the court, and they were, because of the complexity of the probate. That's far more than what the attorney, we get paid as attorney, because we're not really doing the administration. But all that $200,000 would have been totally avoided just by structuring things. Would have taken him a total of 4 or 5 hours of his life of putting together and getting all the documents in place. And his heirs, his children, wouldn't have lost $200,000 to the administration that was necessary to handle everything.
Oh yeah, $200,000. That could buy like a property, guys.
Yeah.
Property. And to hire somebody that the court decided to hire that you didn't even have a say in it. It's wow. We don't want things going through probate. So Taylor, let's talk about what needs to happen. What do we do? What's our first step that we need to do to start protecting our assets and protecting that next generation so that wealth transfers properly and with least amount of costs?
Okay. If you are married, this is a great opportunity for a date night. Some night you go out with your significant other, because you guys own property together. And so you got to really think it through. And you sit down with a piece of paper, and you want to focus on the two big number two questions. Well, number one is, who do we want to put in charge of things? Like, if you have minor kids, who's going to raise your kids? Who could handle the business? And this is a conversation I have to have all the time with people, is understanding. I know you want to leave your business to your children usually, but your children might not be the best person to run your business. And that often I've found it's usually an employee that's going to be the best person. Okay. And so you decide, well, if we were to pass away, the business really can only be run maybe by this person. And so how are you going to handle that situation? Who do you want to actually handle your assets? Now, adding to this, you can also become incapacitated. So it might not be your passing. You might not mentally be able to run your business anymore. And so who are you going to give authority to do those things? Power of attorneys are incredibly important for business owners. It's like, hey, I got to give power of attorney or authority in our documentation that we have. You have what most people have LLC, so they have an operating agreement. And you should be outlining in there, what happens if I can't run things? Who's the next person in line? figuring all that out. So the who is incredibly important, and it's usually what causes the problem, or picking the bad people. No, you're not picking the right people to handle things. Number two is, well, where are certain assets going to go? Now, who's going to inherit this? Who should inherit the business? Who should inherit the other property? And once you kind of go through that and get an understanding, you want to talk to an estate planning attorney. Okay. I tell people all the time, people, whatever they pay a good estate planning attorney, they will save you, sometimes 100 times what you actually been, like that doctor. If he would have gone and seen an estate planning attorney, even the most expensive attorneys would have probably charged him 10 grand, to do his plan, but would have saved him $190,000 in that process, and more, because the business wouldn't have been lost. We don't know all the costs that were lost in different things. So good estate planning attorney is going to save you a lot more than you'll actually pay them. Now, it's usually not realized at that moment, but it's realized over the years in actually putting things together. And so once you get the ideas down, then you want to go talk to an actual professional that knows what they're doing. A lot of people go, well, I'll just go online and print off a bunch of documents. And I'll tell you, I went to law school. I took a whole year of wills and trusts. I took a whole year of estate planning. I went and got a master's in personal finance. And the first time I did my own estate plan on my own, it took me forever, because I was like, well, what about this? And what about this? There's so many things that were going on. So people who think it's easy, it's because you just don't really know all the problems that can happen. And so that's one of the issues that I face a lot of times. People think, oh, you're just printing off a bunch of documents and putting things in there. And it's like, no, that's not what we're doing. We have to fill in information, but we actually have to put everything together and know what your potential problems might be. And so once you get with somebody, then you need to execute it. So one of my biggest problems with attorneys has always been they'll have people come in, they'll do their planning, and then they'll play this game where they just keep going back and forth and never get it actually executed. So my process is very straightforward. I meet with you, and then we have our date we're going to sign. And we're going to figure out everything before that. And my goal is, no more than 3 weeks out. I want everything put together, because, you lose interest in things over time. And so we try to do that. And so it's getting executed. And then the last part is, just because you have a bunch of signed documents doesn't mean it's done right. You got to get the property actually where it needs to be. If it needs to be in the trust, you need to get it into a trust. Properties need to be deeded to the correct places that they're supposed to be deeded to. And that's the last part that usually, gets people fall off, is they don't follow through with the commitment of getting everything set up correctly. So that's the process that you want to go through to get everything done. And it doesn't really take that much time when you sit down and do it.
Oh, yeah. It's just the sitting down and do it, right? It's the getting started, right? That's the hard part there. Once you're working with an amazing attorney like you, it's just much, you know what you're doing. So it goes really well with that. So first of all, Taylor, where do you start with finding a amazing estate attorney like yourself? Like, where do you start? How do you know where one's good? Is it your corporate attorney? Is it like your someone on the, I don't know if anybody, I don't even know if they do yellow pages anymore, but that's how we used to find things. Where do you find an amazing attorney like yourself?
That's actually a really good question, because I have a lot of good reviews online. That's because I do estate planning. But I wouldn't say the best attorneys are the people who have good reviews online. Often attorneys deal in conflict. So I get like negative reviews every once in a while because I deal in conflict. And so the other side, family members will go put negative reviews online and, and stuff like that. So I do not like the traditional way people look is like, oh, you go look online and look at reviews. No, the best usually way is first, you ask around to people and their experiences that identify that the attorney, this is what they focus on. This is their area. You don't want to get somebody that, just does everything and they've only done a few estate plans. They haven't really done very many. And so figuring out, okay, does this person actually do it? And then just go and interview them. Like when you're sitting down with the attorney, uh, you want to find out, and don't be scared of paying a consultation fee. If an attorney's charging you a consultation fee, that means they're busy and they're good. It's like people do that all the time, and I find it very odd that when someone's saying, "Hey, oh, it's just free. You can just meet with me," then just where you start getting scared. Like, okay, well, why doesn't this person have to charge a consultation fee at all? And that's the other thing that people go is they want the cheapest. You don't want the cheapest. Like, you're going to get the cheapest plan. I just had someone come in and said, "Hey, my family law attorney said he'll do this for a lot less than I was going to do it for." And I go, "That's because he doesn't know what he's doing." Because when I'm meeting with somebody, I know I'm not just planning for this. I'm planning for this. I have to know what I'm doing and have the correct ability to actually pull off. But at the end of the day, I'm ensuring that what I've done is correct. I've had to show up to court. So when I'm charging people my fee, part of that's an insurance policy that's saying, "Hey, you're paying an insurance policy," because I have to show up at court sometimes when people are fighting and give testimony. No one pays me for that. I show up. And so when people are charging you little fees, well, they might not be in business. And if you're a business owner, you understand this concept. If you're going to try to be the lowest on the totem pole of fees and what you're charging, it's going to be very hard for you to stay in business if things turn at all. And so you want to be very careful about not doing that. But also, you don't want to get ripped off. I mean, I'm not saying someone quotes you an enormous fee. There's a lot of attorneys I know that are not worth what they're charging, and they charge way too much. But it's hard because a lot of times we get the phone calls like, "How much is this going to cost me?" Well, and my staff is trained to say, "Well, we don't know, because we don't know what you need." You have to sit down with the attorney and go through everything. But I would look at that as my theory. Just understand, go interview an attorney, see if you like them, you trust them, what they're doing. Like yourself, you've written a book. That's a good way. I've written 5 books on this subject, so you can just go read my book if you want to and say, "Oh, does this guy actually knows what he's saying?" But that's a great way. I like to find professionals that have written books because they've sat down for many, many hours and really thought about what they believe in and what actually works. And they know anything I write, the whole world's going to be able to judge me from. So I better make sure I'm accurate. And so I found that is a great way to really find out if an attorney knows what they're saying. Is, have they written a book, and do they put it out there that other people can criticize?
I love it. I love it. Those are some really good pieces of advice, because you're right. If you get your business attorney, he may have only done maybe 4 or 5 in his entire life. But if you've got someone that has done thousands, like 10,000, like Taylor has, and he's gone through probate at least 1,000 times, then it's not his first rodeo. Your plan comes up and it's time for that discussion and what needs to happen and how do we navigate this. So that's going to be really, really important there. So Taylor, I'm curious, like, where do things go wrong? Like, in this process of creating wills and trust, where does it go wrong for those that venture on this?
Not identifying the problem areas a person's going to have. Okay, if someone, you have to identify everybody's situation's different. And when I'm interviewing people, that's what I'm trying to pick up is like, where are the problems? One of the things that why I love doing probate is I could just have an estate planning practice that I only do estate planning. And in all honesty, I make more money doing estate planning than I do probate. So people are like, "Why are you wasting your time? Your calendar's full." And like, "Why are you wasting your time going to probate court and dealing with that?" Because that's where I get to learn where things go wrong. And so I take it as education for me as I'm going through that process. I'm identifying things going, "Oh, if I structure someone's estate plan this way, this can go wrong." And so when I'm talking to people in the consultation, I'm going, "Okay, this is something you need to worry about." But when people are sitting down with me, that's the first thing. Like, one of the biggest issues is going to be relationships. Relationships cause so many problems when people pass away because there's a vacuum that happens when that person's gone. Family structures aren't very stable, and people start fighting over those assets. And that is where most of the money is lost, is attorney fees. attorneys fighting back and forth. And so understanding the complexities, like I have a conversation when people want to disinherit a kid or treat kids differently. And I have to be very careful with people going, okay, have you talked to your child why you're going to leave 70% to this kid, but 30% to the other one? Because when they see that document that my sibling got 70, I got 30, they don't take that as, oh, well, they needed 70. They take that as that's how much they love the other one more than me. And it hurts them. And so I'm and they're like, if they're saying things to me like, oh, I can't have that conversation with them because, they'd be really hurt. I go, so you want the executor to tell them this, when you're not here? That's the plan that we're going to go with, is we're thinking that through and what that's going to happen. And you're not worried that they might run down and go get an attorney and go, I don't care, burn the whole thing down because I'm hurt. So we want to avoid scenarios like blended families. Those are really complex problems because you're going to leave your IRA that has $1 million in it to your new spouse. Well, they then can just change the beneficiary and leave it to their kids. And your kids get cut out. So often we have this scenario of like, who lives longer gets everything. And a lot of times people like almost do it by accident because they roll it over into an account and then they're filling out the beneficiaries and they just, put their kids on there. But I tell people all the time, this scenario happens over and over and over again. If the man lives longer than the woman, there's a high likelihood he's going to remarry and leave everything to new spouse. Happens over and over. I sit in these conversations over and over, and this is what happens. Women, they generally look to take care of their children. They will go and, okay, I got to make sure my children are taken care of. So when I'm doing planning on second marriage with a woman, generally she's like, okay, I need to make sure my kids are taken care of. But often they will cut out the previous spouse's kids. I have it happen all the time. So I explain to people all the time that it's like, you can leave everything to your spouse and take away one thing, the power to give away your property to somebody else than you've stated. And so you can plan out anything that you want to do in those scenarios. So we have those issues that come up all the time. And then we have tax issues that you guys deal with all the time. You're very well know as a CPA, the IRS, when someone passes away, they get to value your estate. They get to say, this is what we think your business is worth. And then you got to fight that. I think Michael Jackson, I don't know all the details, but I know enough that of his situation, they valued his likeness at an absurd amount of money. And it was like more money was going to be owed in taxes than the estate had. So they were going to force his family to sell off his likeness. And that's a sad story that the family is going to lose. It's almost like losing that person because the IRS said, oh, it's worth this. And luckily they had good attorneys that fought for them and were able to get that fixed. But you don't know what the IRS is going to say your business is worth. And in 2026, we're going back down. The exemption amount's going back down. So we got to address that problem with people that own businesses or have large life insurance policies.
Oh, yeah.
Life insurance is included in part of your valuation of everything, which people are shocked to find that out.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of things that can go wrong. And I think blended families are they're occurring more often than they're not these days. And remarriages too happen more often than not. And so it's very important to think about that even when things are good and figure out what that outcome is and work with a great attorney like Taylor when you are alive and kicking, right? Versus when it's too late. Taylor, this has been so much like a gift just being able to spend time with you and our audience, I'm sure is very appreciative and are probably writing your name down now as we speak. But one of the questions we like to ask our guests as we close out is if you could leave our guests with one piece of advice, it can be personal, it can be business related. What would that piece of advice be?
Well, since this is a business podcast, is understanding that in life is when you're running your business, it's very much a competition. You're competing against other people, and paying attention to the little things is very important because that's how things kind of fall apart and don't work right, whether it's in estate planning, whether it's focusing on profits. You know this very well. Like, yeah, I'll get people in all the time and be like, oh, well, those are just little fees here and there and there. And I'm like, but those fees add up. You start a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and that compounds when that was money you could have been investing. And so it's these little things and understanding when you're running a business, you got to run a straight ship, and people get overwhelmed and this is just too much. There's too many things to worry about. And it's like, it's wrong to approach it. You have to fix everything right now. A little bit each day, you work on it, fix it, get it aligned. But it's those little things all the time that you need to pay attention to.
I love it. And today, the little thing is your estate planning. So don't put that off, right? Don't put that off, because we never know when our day is our last day. So, Taylor, this was amazing. How do we reach you? How do our audience find you? How do they work with you? How do they learn more? How do they get a copy of your book? What's the best way?
So our webpage, you can go to our webpage. You can get to it two ways. One, you can just put my name, taylorwillingham.com, but our actual official firm is willprobateattorneys.com. And then our phone number is 214-250-4407. That's the best way to call in and get a hold of us if you need assistance.
Thank you, Taylor, so much. And thank you for just your gift of knowledge on our podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.